In this video, we're going to tie a little fly called the Juju Emerger, developed by Charlie Craven. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start about a third of the way back from the eye of the hook. I'm going to start with the Tiemco 101 dry fly hook and some Veevus 14-aught or 16-aught olive thread. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the tails, and for this we're going to use a couple little Microfibbets, or also known as Mayfly tails. This can be the trickiest part of the fly. So we're going to take those two Mayfly tails and we're just going to get them so that the tips are as even as we get them. So usually you have to kind of split them and then even them up. If you don't get them even at this point, it's going to make it more difficult to even them up down the road. So you want to make sure to get them perfectly even, and we want these to be about the length of the shank of the hook. So I'm just going to kind of roughly measure out the length there, lay it on top of the shank of the hook. You want to make sure you're on top and not on the sides, and we're going to wrap back down the shank of the hook with nice even smooth wraps. Then I'm going to take those Microfibbets, I'm just going to kind of push them up with my finger, pull them to each side. Then I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go in between them here. Once I kind of get them kinked up, I'm going to go in between them. Then I'm going to go back down in between them again. Essentially what that does, it kind of forms a figure eight around those tails. Then I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap forward with nice smooth wraps. This is in preparation for making our body nice and even and smooth. And you can trim out those excess. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the body material. And what I've done is I've taken 2 strands of olive Superhair, 1 strand of black Superhair. We're going to pull these all together in one clump. I'm going to tie them in along the side of the body here. Nice, even, perfectly smooth wraps. I'm going to take it all the way back to the tail. Then I'm going to take my thread and wrap forward again. Nice, smooth, even wraps. This is very important with this fly that you do smooth wraps on the body. If you don't, you're not going to be able to wrap that Superhair and get nice, even, smooth wraps. Then we're going to take that Superhair, we're going to draw it all together, and we're going to make a nice tight first wrap. And after I make my first wrap, you're going to see the Superhair isn't perfectly even. So then I'm going to take my fingernail and just lightly kind of coax all that Superhair into place. And if you don't get it right the first time, you can always just back off a few wraps, push it back, and usually I can tell by my second wrap whether all that Superhair is nice and even. And then you pull hard, not too hard, but pull with some nice good tension as you wrap forward with that Superhair. The trick is to have some nice tension on that Superhair. If your wraps are too loose, the Superhair is going to jump over itself, kind of get mangled and tangled together. Then I can capture that Superhair, trim it out of there. Now we're ready for our thorax, and for that I'm going to use some olive Superfine dubbing. And we want to make sure that we dub this nice and tight. We're going to create kind of a ball for a thorax. So I'm just going to start off with a tiny bit of dubbing at first. And you can see I'm not towards the eye of the hook at all. I've stayed back about a third of the way back from the eye of the hook. And I've wrapped up about 2/3. That's important with this fly as well, because if you get too close to that eye at this point, you're going to be crowding the eye and you're going to run out of some room as we tie in the legs and the wings. So you want to make sure you leave that room at the front of the fly. And we're just going to build up that thorax ball, and you can see I'm kind of using an X kind of wrap to kind of keep that ball nice and tight. There we go. And now we're ready to tie in the legs. And for the legs we're going to use some hen hackle here. I'm going to use some brown. All I'm going to do is just take a few fibers here, get those tips of those fibers nice and even. I'm just going to pluck them from the feather. And I'm going to tie these in on each side of the fly, and I want them to be about as long as the body. So I'm just going to take them, pinch them in on one side. Oopsie. Try that again here. Grazed my finger a little bit with the thread. There we go. If you want them a little longer, a little shorter, you can kind of pull them into place. Then I'm going to do the same exact thing here on the other side. It's always best too, if you have any doubts, to tie them in a little bit long, and you can always pull on the butt ends here to kind of shrink them. And you can trim out all the excess. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the wing. For this, we're going to use a couple of CDC feathers. You can use kind of a dun color, an olive color, a brownish color. You just kind of want to keep it nice and buggy. I'm going to use kind of a natural dun color here. So we're going to take a couple of those CDC feathers. We're going to even them up at the tips. Trying to keep them as even as possible. And we're going to tie this in. And I like to tie mine in a little long, kind of like I did the legs. I do 2 wraps, and I just hold the thread and pull down on that CDC until I get that nice little tuft of CDC right on top of the fly. Now we're going to tie in a little bit of sparkle. We're going to take some white fluorofiber. We're going to take 3 strands of it. I'm going to tie it in along the side of the hook here. Kind of an upward, kind of along the side and at an upward angle. And I'll just pull the other piece here to the other side. I'm going to trim them to the length of the body so that they just kind of barely reach past that CDC puff. Then I'm going to take a tiny bit of dubbing. I'm just going to coat my thread with a little bit of that dubbing. Gotta be really careful not to use too much. I literally just kind of coated my thread. We're just going to form a little bit of a head. Again, you got to be really careful not to overdo it. There we are. And then you can whip finish right up against the eye. That is the Juju Emerger. Great little buggy mayfly pattern. Kind of like the Jujubaetis, but more of an emerger style. That CDC will hold in a little bit of air, make it look like it's emerging. That is the Juju Emerger.